Welcoming to the Keon Sports Podcast. A very special guest today, legendary wrestler Nikita Koloff. Put your feet up, sit tight, and grab something cold to drink. Up next, Nikita Koloff. Welcoming to the Keon Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Vince McKee. If you would like to be a sponsor of our show, email me, Vince McKee, at CoachVin14 at yahoo.com. As you've seen over the last couple weeks, we've had the biggest and best names from pro wrestling, boxing, and MMA, and bigger things are set to come. Very excited to have our guest on today, Nikita Koloff. He was a feared Russian. Although he was a childhood favorite of mine, he was also a very, very scary man. We are so excited to have him on, as he truly was one of the greatest characters in professional wrestling history. Without any further ado, here is Nikita Koloff. On the hotline now, one of my childhood favorites, Nikita Koloff. This is we've had a lot of big names as of late, but to me, this is one of my all-time favorites. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it is great to be with you, Vince, and I just appreciate you including me today.
Oh, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you now, did you grow up a wrestling fan? And if so, who were some of your heroes and people that you liked watching? And if not, what about football? Because I know you had a football background as well.
I did. I did have. I mean, I was passionate from a young age. I was just super passionate about football and weightlifting. Those are kind of my two passions, right? I picked up a muscle magazine when I was age 12, kind of fell in love with bodybuilding, and then started watching, professional football on TV. I thought, one day I want to do that. And that became my driving force really all through junior high, high school, even into my college years. And I was familiar with professional wrestling up in Minneapolis. We had the AWA, Vern Gagne, with the AW All-Star Wrestling, as they called it. And so I knew a handful of the names. I didn't really watch it much, but, you turn to the channels, and back in those days, I don't think we had more than 3 channels. I'm aging myself for some of your listeners, but they're like, what is he talking about? And there was no remote control, so you had to actually get out of your chair to change the television set. But I remember watching, and some of the guys, and then in my early college days, I actually worked out in North Minneapolis, a little sweat box gym called Ventura's Gym, which for the wrestling fan would know as Jesse the Body Ventura.
Absolutely.
So that was kind of my that was the first time I ever met an actual professional wrestler. I had seen Kurt Henning's dad at our high school football games. We played football together in high school and against each other in college, but I'd never met Larry the Axe. So.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, too. Is that you had aspirations to play professional football. And here's another thing that's going to date some people out there, but something to actually remember. I'm old enough to remember the USFL. There was the NFL and then also the USFL for about 3 seasons. You had thought that was going to be your path, and then you met Joe Laurinaitis, who has all you guys know is Animal from the Road Warriors. You met Joe, and eventually, lo and behold, you became a professional wrestler. Can you talk about that decision not to pursue a career in football, but rather professional wrestling?
Yeah, it's kind of turnabout is fair play, the expression goes. I recruited Joe. I literally recruited Joe out of Iredale High School in New Brighton, Minnesota, to play college football. We became like inseparable brothers. I mean, best of friends, and played several years of ball together. He eventually dropped out of college, and the next thing I knew, he was in Georgia, as this road warrior guy. And so I'd be over at his parents' house. We'd be watching TBS on Saturday nights and his matches in the ring. And then, lo and behold, I got a random call one morning from him, and he shared, the idea of a nephew for Ivan Koloff, legendary Ivan Koloff, the Russian Bear, who defeated Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Garden, and created a riot. And and so and I thought, well, I'll give wrestling a shot. I mean, again, it wasn't really on my radar, but the door of opportunity opened up. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll continue on the path of pursuing professional football. But as those who know the story, or if they want certainly more of the story, we have limited time today, but they can, just go to my website, go to koloff.org, and they can read about more of the story.
Oh, absolutely, and I would encourage people to do so. And again, guys, that's koloff.org. Check that out the second you get done with this interview. And listen, so I think one of the most unique things is, a couple of things. I've always said the Lord works in mysterious ways, and, things seem to line up for people who believe. And it's just incredible to me that we have this hardworking guy from Robbinsdale, Minnesota, and I would encourage everybody to look into Robbinsdale, Minnesota, and the wrestlers who have come out of that. That's ridiculously incredible in itself. So not only that, but now you become this hated Russian, and you have to live the character. So how tough was it to stay in character every single time you left the house? Because legend has it that's exactly what you did.
I did for even 3 years after I left wrestling, because I was trained by Don Kernodle and Ivan Koloff and some of the best, old school, where you protected the business. And so I carried that accent forward for 3 years after I left wrestling as well. And I just made up in my mind, if I'm going to get this character over, and even our conversation prior to the interview today, and even recently on social media, there was a guy posted something from last Friday. He said, you speak English, dude, until like right now. Like I did. Oh my gosh, you're not from Russia. And so it was just a mindset for me. And I come to learn a term years later. I didn't know this is what I was doing, but I guess it's called method acting. Sure. And without having any acting lessons, that's what I did. I just projected myself in that role and thought, if I really want to get this character over, this is what I have to do, and that's what I did.
So there's a guy out there for wrestling fans. You know him as Smash from Demolition. You also know him as the Repo Man. Way later on in WCW, Barry Darsow played the role of the Blacktop Bully. However, what a lot of people don't realize is that Barry Darsow, actually another guy from Minnesota, actually was one of the Russians as well, with Nikita and Ivan. He came in as Crusher Khrushchev. What made Barry Darsow such a good fit in that Russian stable with you guys?
Well, and he's not just from Minnesota. He came from Robbinsdale, Minnesota.
There you go.
He graduated a year after me. We played on the same football team together as well, along with Rick Rude and Kurt Hennig. But Barry got in prior to me while I was still finishing a college career. He had got involved. He was in Louisiana with Bill Watts in the Mid-South, and actually wrestling with Nikolai Volkov in the Mid-South. So he had already, and it was kind of the Russian turncoat. He was kind of the version of Don Kernodle of the Mid-South, right? Don Kernodle was an American turncoat with Ivan. Barry was American turncoat with Nikolai. And then we just, at some point I reached out to him. I said, hey, come on up to the Carolinas, man. We'll tag you with the Russian name Crusher Khrushchev, and you can be our third wheel, and we'll have some fun with the world tag belts, and the 6-man titles.
So I have to tell you too, I'm 38 years old now, but as a kid, I finally remember watching you and watching Demolition Smash, which again is Barry Darsow. Do you still talk with him? Can you still send him a message if you needed to?
Yeah, I mean we talk. In fact, when I still make trips occasionally back to Minnesota, I still have family up there who migrated from Moscow, but so yeah, and in fact, we've gone to lunch a handful of times when I've been up there and reached out to him, and he's got a very thriving printing business up there in Minnesota, and with one of our old high school mates. And then we'll see each other at Legends autograph signings from time to time and catch up.
Yeah, if you could, I don't normally ask this of guests, but we've been trying to get Smash on the show. I actually didn't realize he retired. I'd called his print shop last week when I was trying to book some guests. So if next time you talk to him, if you could shoot him my phone number, I would be forever grateful.
I will put an encouraging plug in for you. For sure.
Thank you. Let me make sure I get done with your interview first and impress you first. So, after a run as a 6-man tag champions, and again, I always encourage fans to look into that as well. NWA had a 6-man tag championship that you were a part of. Eventually, you go on, and I thought this was really, really cool because you would end up teaming with Dusty Rhodes one day. But before you teamed with Dusty Rhodes, you were against him and Manny Fernandez for the NWA Tag Championships. Now, I ask you this kind of a two-part question. What was it like to wrestle against Dusty Rhodes? What was it like to wrestle with Dusty Rhodes? And just how special was he?
Well, gosh, great questions. And really, even prior to defeating him and Manny for the World Tag Belts, as Ivan and I did, I worked an angle with Dusty. He came into the territory, and the first thing he did is believe it or not, because he was a really great athlete back in his, younger days, college days. And it was very, as fans followed him, he was just a gifted athlete through his whole career, especially with the microphone. But we did an arm wrestling thing, and so we had a lot of single matches against each other. And again, kind of took me under his wing and was teaching me some of the old school psychology of wrestling. Went on to beat him for the belts, and was in some memorable matches. And then, as many fans know, became the Superpowers and came to his rescue against the Four Horsemen in the cage in Charlotte, North Carolina. And went on to do really sellout business for well over 2 years. Wherever we went, it didn't matter. And so just a unique opportunity to be on both sides of the fence, and especially his partner and travel with him. We traveled exclusively many times together in his convertible red Mercedes-Benz to towns. And looking back on it, he really honestly carries a special place in my heart because I consider to be one of the creative geniuses of wrestling, developing the Great American Bash, the War Games, and the Best of 7 series with Magnum TA, and so many other things. So really, really great memories of Dusty as a personal friend outside of the wrestling business.
Yeah, and I always felt it would have been great now with Cody Runnels running AEW if they could have had the Great American Bash move to AEW's, promotion. They're not going to do it. I think WWE owns the rights, but all that aside, it was because for a kid like myself who wasn't always in the best shape, I was always super, super skinny. I was the opposite of Dusty Rhodes. I was a skinny pencil neck geek, as Freddie Blassie would call me. But Dusty Rhodes he was the opposite. He was there's no polite way to say this, but he was a big fat guy, and for him to be as agile as he was and have that charisma, I think that gave people without the best bodies inspiration, like, hey, you could do this, you could do anything you want in life. And I think that always made him great. So I had Ricky Morton on the show Saturday morning. I talked with Ricky Morton for a while. He was probably the longest interview we've ever done. And he wanted me to ask you about the time you headbutted him. So here's the thing. I research these interviews. I mean, first of all, I've been watching wrestling my whole life. I'm a diehard. I research. I know nothing about this story, so you're going to have to fill me in.
So it was really, it was my first main event match. And so again, to give you a condensed version of the story, for those who don't know my story, again, go on the website and read about it. But I broke into professional wrestling with no amateur wrestling background and zero professional training prior to my first match on television in the Dorton Arena in Raleigh, and 11 seconds later I had my first win. Fast forward maybe 2-3 months, and we're wrestling in South Carolina, and they throw me in the ring in a tag match with the Rock and Roll, and it's, I'm just a few months into this thing. I mean, I don't even really know how to tie up, and so I come, Ricky and I are in the ring, and we're gonna lock up, and I'm like a bull in a china shop, and he knows he doesn't know anything, but when we tie up, I guess you're gonna the listener have to kind of visualize this, but my head's down and I'm intense because that's just how I was, and he ties up and man, we smash foreheads, and he staggers back into his corner. He looks at Robert and gives him a few colorful words. He goes, "What the heck? Who is this? Who is this guy?" He goes, "Robert, watch this. I'm going to teach this kid a lesson." and we lock up the next time, and instead, again, for those who maybe don't know what a lockup is, but he puts his elbow forward, and my forehead rams right into the tip of his elbow, and I stagger back into my corner. And I'm like, Ivan, what the heck just happened there, right? All that to say, I never locked up with my head down ever again. Eyes up, paying attention to what was going on. So credit Ricky Morton for teaching me how to properly lock up in a ring.
Oh, that's hilarious. I'm just glad you didn't get split open, because sometimes if you catch an elbow the wrong way in the forehead, they'll just cut you right open. That is a great story, though.
Yeah, I don't think that I recall that day, but I definitely had a little welt on my forehead. I can thank you, Ricky Morton.
No, that's awesome. So I wanted to ask you too. The Road Warriors. Obviously, you talked about Joe a little bit earlier. How tough were they to work with in the ring? And I don't say that to be negative at all. That's not where I'm going with this. But how stiff were they? How did you had to feel that you were in there after a Road Warriors match? I guess what I'm trying to say is that you had to have felt like, wow, it's a long day at the office.
Well, again, a great question. Let me make a comment on something along with the Road Warriors, because
Sure.
The Road Warriors had of course, obviously a very different look. I mean, dating back to Superstar Billy Graham, and even Jesse Ventura, they were kind of the forerunners of muscled up guys for wrestling. But the Road Warriors, of course, brought a very different look with the paint on their faces and the mohawks and the different things, eventually spiked shoulder pads and other things that bring. But the comment I want to make is, going back to Dusty and what you said about Dusty, and really what made wrestling, I believe, unique in that era was whether it's an overweight guy or a muscled up guy, or two little guys like the Rock and Roll Express, or someone who was gifted and smooth as a Ricky Steamboat or a Magnum TA. That's what made wrestling unique in that era, was all the different looks of guys. And then the common man. What did Dusty always say? Man, I'm the son of a plumber from Austin, Texas, baby, yeah, if you will. But he gave the common guy some inspiration to say, man, if he can do it, maybe I can do it too, right? So I say all that to lead into the Road Warriors, and it was eye for an eye, and what I mean by that, Vince, is I was every bit as stiff as they were. So if it was going to be a long day at the office, as you said, it was going to be delivered as much as it was going to be received. But I say that to say that was their style of wrestling. It was my style of wrestling, and what made the matches with Magnum TA and the Best of Seven very memorable to fans was the snug, I'll use that term, snug style that we worked with. But that snug style gave believability to the matches.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I remember watching that as a fan, and it's funny, too, because you transitioned perfectly into my next question. It's almost like you had it in front of you, because my very next question was going to be about Magnum TA. And fans my age will remember Magnum TA, being able to actually watch him wrestle. And, this could be a very short answer or a long answer. However you want to take this is fine. But I'm just dying to know, because I've talked to several people. Had he not had his tragic accident, Do you think he would have been one of the greatest wrestlers of all time? Because the path he was on so early into his career, it was shaping up to be that way. He had the look, he had the charisma. He just seemed to have it. Do you think Magnum TA would have been the greatest, one of the best we'd ever seen?
Absolutely. He had the Jimmy the Greek back in the day used to call it the intangible. Magnum had the intangible factor, and he was being groomed to be the world heavyweight champion. Not only would I think he would have had a very long, successful career, and you may or may not ask this question, but I've been asked it recently. Had he not had the accident, of course, we'll never know the answer to this question. Sure. But had he not had the accident, would Nikita Koloff have become a good guy, a baby face, a partner of Dusty Rhodes, and a superpower? Well, we don't know for sure. However, looking back, my guess would be possibly not, meaning because of the chemistry he and I had in the ring and what we did with that series, the best of 7 with U.S. title, a very unique series, he would have went on to win the world title. He and I probably would have went back and forth exchanging that belt, a few times anyway, handful of times, and had a long career against each other as well.
You know what's amazing? You've now done it 3 questions in a row where you have actually transitioned into my next question. So,
and I don't even have a script. How about that, folks? I don't even. Hey, Vince, that leads into why the wrestling's so different today than back then. We didn't have scripts back then. We did a spontaneous improv.
Called it on the fly, and this is definitely chemistry. And I always said you never want to. Sometimes you never want to meet your heroes, because every now and then they could turn out to be a jerk and break your heart. So sure. It's really cool to meet someone I looked up to, and you're actually a good guy. And the chemistry is off the charts, so I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Oh gosh, yeah, no problem. So again, transitioning that. So here's the thing, guys, and everybody, like you said, go to Koloff.com, read all about it. But listen, so with Magnum TA out, they had to turn Nikita face. Okay, so you take this hated Russian with a lot of heat on him, and you turn him babyface, which is basically unheard of. He's able to pull it off, which leads me to my next question then, which was, what did it mean to you to be chosen to wrestle the great Ric Flair at Starrcade 1986?
Yeah, well, I mean, and of course, preceding that, it's interesting. So the very first ever Great American Bash, 1985. Let's back up just a little bit more backstory for your listeners. So I'm only 13 months into the wrestling business. 13 months. Again, no amateur background, no professional training, and I'm already world tag team champion and world 6-man champion, and now I'm wrestling Nature Boy Ric Flair for the world heavyweight champion in front of 25, 30, 35,000 people at the first ever Great American Bash. That in itself was an experience and a learning experience for sure. It shortened the curve on my learning because I've always said Rick could make a broomstick look good, and because he made the Russian Nightmare look good. Fast forward a year and a half or so later to Starrcade 86. And now it's flipped, right? When I went into the ring in 85, as you said, I was one of the most hated guys in wrestling already at that time. He was wrestling as the babyface. Now it's flipped, though. Now I've come in as the babyface in Starrcade 86, and he's wrestling as the heel. And it was every bit as electric that night as it was at the American Bash in 85. And in a polarizing way. And so I'm very grateful, thankful to have had the experience on both sides of the fence, to be able to both be a fan favorite, but also, be at one point the number one most hated guy in wrestling. And wrestling was, if you want to say, you said the Road Warriors was like a long day at the office. Well, Rick wasn't. Even though I had many 60-minute matches against him and was sucking a lot of wind, it was still, in a sense, a night off just because of the consummate professional that he was.
So moving on, towards the end of the interview, thank you again. When you came back, to WCW, one of the guys there at the time was Sting, Steve Borden. And Sting, to me, was probably one of the most popular wrestlers in WCW history, and I would even venture to say maybe NWA as well if you want to intertwine the two, because obviously, Jim Crockett Promotions and all that becomes WCW. But to me, Sting was one of the easiest guys to root for as a fan. Why do what was it about him? What were some of the intangibles, and there's that word again that we love, intangibles, about Sting that really made the fans go crazy for him? Because you had one hell of a feud when you came back.
Yeah, he just had that, his whole character that he developed, both, when he had more of the flashy, blonde spiked hair, flashy, and then eventually, went to, what do they term it, the crow look or whatever. He just had a certain look about him, and just even his ring attire and the matches themselves, he became just such a ring technician, that he knew how to draw the fans into the story, whatever story was being told, whether it was him and I feuding against one another, or eventually in the latter part of my career, teaming up together. He just had that ability to draw the fans into the story, and was just, like you said, a very likable character, on either side. The mystery about him, he said something earlier about, Lord works in mysterious ways, and there was just a mystery about his character and the way they told the story that I think fans really just gravitated towards. And so Steve was amazing. He was really amazing.
So a couple questions left here as we wind this up, and I thank you so very much. We've, transition again there as well. We've seen a lot of guys, yourself, Lex Luger, and Sting. I'm just going to use you three as the example. And really, even Ted DiBiase as well. We've seen a lot of professional wrestlers after retirement, kind of spread the message of the Lord. And that's a big deal to me as a devout Christian my whole life. When I see professional athletes do that, I absolutely love that. I think that's one of the best messages they can give. So were you, I guess, not really surprised, but, when you saw guys like Sting and also, really more so a guy like Lex Luger, who really was way out there for a while and kind of, had to have a tragic accident happen to him that kind of come back around. How positive is that we have role models, in the world of professional wrestling who could come out of character, talk about their relationship with the Lord? And then for you personally, can you tell us a little bit about Fellowship of the Sword?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I think for your listeners to understand, some might be asking the question, well, why is that? Why do these guys, and a number of them retire from wrestling and then seem to all of a sudden, find a platform with ministry. And I know Steve's story very well because I've mentored and discipled him when he made his decision to give his life to the Lord in August of '98. I know Lex's story extremely well. When April 23rd, 2006, he surrendered his life to Jesus. So you use those two guys as examples. And what both of them and others have discovered is no matter what level you achieve in success in life, no matter how high a ladder you climb or what pinnacle you reach, really there's a built-in, I like to say, eternity is built into every one of our hearts by the creator of the universe. And so there's a void there in our hearts until we surrender our heart and our life to Jesus. There's always a void there that people run after, chase after success and all these other things, whether it's in the corporate world or championship belts or trophies or Super Bowls or whatever else, whatever it is, Major League Baseball, you pick a sport, Stanley Cup in hockey, whatever it is. right? Guys are running after the brass ring. Women are running after success, only to realize at the end of the day, it still leaves a void and emptiness. I know for me, I was successful, but I was unfulfilled. I became a world champion and had a notoriety around the world in some ways, but yet I was unfulfilled in my pursuit of success. And it was only, for me, 17 October 1993, that, and by the way, I didn't grow up in church in Minnesota or in Moscow. I didn't grow up in church. I understood the story of salvation. I understood it in my head, but that story never made the 18-inch trip from my head to my heart. And when it did in 1993, October 17th, my life forever changed. I mean, I went from successful to becoming an unfulfilled to becoming instantly fulfilled. And my life took on a whole new meaning of significance. And I realized, wow, I'm here on this planet to do more than just entertain fans in a wrestling ring and talk on interviews. And there's a higher purpose for my life. And now I have fortunately been blessed to spend the last 25 plus years. I've now traveled to all 50 states. I've traveled so far to 30 different countries, sharing the gospel, preaching as an evangelist, but also teaming up with Lex Luger. He and I, in fact, we just a few weeks ago finished an event called Man Camp. People check it out on mancamp.info, I-N-F-O, mancamp.info. He and I co-facilitate. Both of us have a real heart for men and to minister to men and help them be healthy. Of course, with our backgrounds in health and wellness, we incorporate health and wellness. We incorporate having the right mentality, a championship mentality, and what it takes to be successful. But also, we share our spiritual journeys in these camps that we do now with small groups of men. And our goal is to impact, for the ladies listening out there, our goal is to send your men home better equipped to be men of God, godly husbands, godly fathers, and to fulfill the call on their life. And so, in a nutshell, that would summarize, I hope, or somewhat answer your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the one thing I would share, too, for people out there listening is that even in my own life and my own career, okay, I've been able to do the TV stuff and the radio stuff and, having 9 published books, all that's well and great. But I'll tell you something right now. I don't think I've ever been happier than I was the night my first daughter was baptized. Just something about it, man. And it was such a feeling. And she was like glowing in my arms. And to explain something like that and to see your kids born and know that you're going to bring them to Jesus and understand that is so, so important, because you could be the richest man in the world or you could be the most famous man in the world, but if you're not at peace with the Lord, in my mind, you have nothing at all. And that's just something I feel so strongly about. And like I told you with Barry Darso, same message goes for Lex. I mean, please pass on the information. We would love to have him on, and talk about the message both you guys are spreading, because I just think, more so than a wrestling career, to me, that answer that you just gave is more important than anything else we've talked about. So really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. You just said something real key. No matter how much you have, without that personal relationship with the Lord, you really do have nothing. You think you have everything when in reality you have nothing, because eternity is real, and one day we'll all face it. And it was great to hear a little bit of your story as well. And you're right about the books, and I'm working on a brand new book right now, and adding several new chapters to my last book, Nikita, A Tale of the Ring and Redemption, and telling more of my story from over the last few years. I'm adding some new stories there. And one other thing real quick.
Sure.
I'm gonna have a special chapter in there called, I think we're gonna call it Your Stories. And what I mean by that is I've asked over the last couple of months fans and churches and places I've spoke or autograph signing, places I've been, that if somebody has a story, on how I some way, whether it's been encouraged or scared them to death, like you said, I scared you to death when you were a kid. But if they have a story on somehow how I've impacted their life or made an impression or a difference, send me that story, and I'm going to include some of those stories in the revision of A Ring of Redemption. And so some people might actually see their name in print. So I'm going to do that as well. So.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Well, we want to thank you. One last question for you too. How special was your NWA Hall of Fame induction in 2008?
It was. I mean, the Hall of Fame. People ask me, "Don't you want to get in the WWE Hall of Fame?" I'm like, you know what? Most important to me, personally, is not if I get in. I would rather see Ivan Koloff get in because I feel he deserves it. I mean, he dedicated 40, 50 years of his life to professional wrestling. If anyone deserved it, it would be Ivan. The NWA was special because I tell people I'm a loyalist. I've been loyal to the NWA my whole career. We didn't really talk about it, but I really had no interest in going to WWF, WWE.
Sure.
Really, Jim Crockett gave me my break and my chance, and then to be inducted into Dan Gable's the Hall of Fame up in Waterloo, Iowa, for the avid wrestling fan. Go up to Waterloo, Iowa, the Dan Gable Museum, and there's an amazing, what I consider one of the most amazing Hall of Fames on the planet up there in Waterloo, Iowa. And, to be inducted in that Hall of Fame as well as the NWA was very, very special. And so I appreciate that. Appreciate you asking.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, guys, check out Koloff.com. Check out all of his books. They're phenomenal. I will say this, too, about his loyalty, and I really want this to sink in. In 1987, he would have had a chance to leave with Barry Darsow to the WWF. Instead, he didn't. He chose to stay with NWA. That shows a ton of loyalty right there. So, again, thank you so much for coming on. I will send you a link to this when we're all done. And is there any messages you want to, any lasting messages or anything you want to go ahead and plug for all the fans out there to learn more about you and your message?
Sure, I appreciate it, and they can follow me. I know you're saying Koloff. Let's make sure they're Koloff.org.
Yes.
Yep. Koloff.org. If you want to learn about the ministry, Lex and I facilitate, mancamp.info, INFO. And if you want to follow me on social media, just real quick, Instagram, Twitter, just Nikita Koloff with the number 1 behind it. That's the real me. And I do have a Facebook presence. And if you want to know which one is really me on Facebook, you brought up a name. There's 3 guys standing in a river, and I don't know, did you do any research on that? Would you guess what river we're standing in there, Vince?
Go right ahead.
Well, it's the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, myself, and a wrestling friend of ours, Jason Sanderson. We're actually standing in the Jordan River because we were taking turns baptizing each other. You mentioned baptizing your daughter. Yeah, we were baptizing each other in the Jordan River in Israel, and so that's the real me on Facebook. If you want to follow me on Facebook,
that is incredible. Yeah, and I mean, I saw Ted DiBiase had the documentary come out a couple years ago on DVD, and I just thought that was amazing too. And the sacrifice his own son has made to walk away from wrestling to be with his family is just incredible. So honestly, thank you so much. I'll talk to you real soon. I'm going to send you a message later today. And I truly appreciate everything you've done for me in my life and my career. The inspiration is definitely there. And thank you again.
For all you listeners out there, you listen in to Key on Sports. You do it.
That's awesome. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye now. That was awesome. It's hard not to mark out when you have on one of your favorites. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what else to say. Just amazing. So want to thank Nikita Koloff. Check out Koloff.org, not .com, Koloff.org. Buy his books and just learn about his life because it really, truly is amazing. Hopefully he can get word to Barry Darsow and Lex Luger, as that would be huge for us as well. We would love to talk to those guys. For Key on Sports, I am Vince McKee. Everybody have a blessed day. Thank you again.